over 50 years, Formula One has been two contests. One between the drivers on the track and the other between the Formula One rule makers and the engineers who design and build the cars. Because of this, Formula One is the most technologically advanced sport in the world. Its engineering is more aeroplane than automobile. The rules are the formula. They define everything. Size of tires, chassis dimensions, type of engine, even track safety. Formula One, like a game of chess, played at 300 kilometers an hour. This Formula One car was built by Williams Grand Prix Engineering in 1993. It's called an FW15. Alain Prost won the World Drivers' Championship in it. Underneath its carbon fiber skin is a treasure trove of computer-controlled hydraulic hardware. The FW15 had traction control, electronic engine management, a computer-controlled semi-automatic gearbox, and active suspension. Without electronics, the car would have been impossible to drive. It remains the most technologically advanced racing car ever built.
We were adding such a high degree of complexity to the car with all of the suspension electronically controlled, but in immense power that the engineer could then have to literally fly this low-flying aircraft at any attitude he wanted, make it roll, compensate, roll into the corners instead of rolling out, all sorts of powers we had.
The car was so advanced technically. In many ways it's the most advanced racing car that's ever been built technically, because a lot of the things that it had were banned subsequently.
The FW15 was banned at the end of the 1993 season. Formula One's rule makers, the FIA, were concerned about three aspects of this generation of Formula One cars. Track speed had become dangerously high. The software within the cars was impossible to police. And the electronics created a perception that Formula One cars were removing driver skill.
Part of what Formula One is about is understanding how good drivers are and demonstrating driver skill, and those things really took some of that away, so they should go. And they really were saying Formula One is a different thing to road cars.
But road cars are increasingly important to Formula One. The big car manufacturers are moving in the hope that the technical glamour of racing will rub off on their products. Williams driver Juan Pablo Montoya and test driver Marc Genet are at Valencia's racing circuit to thrill the guests of one of Williams' biggest sponsors. They'll do this in a road car stuffed with electronic driver aids to make it easier to control. But they'll turn off the most vital driver aid, stability or traction control. With the traction control turned off, the handling of the cars is now down to driver skill. They can perform maneuvers impossible with the electronics fully engaged. When Montoya steals back the drive from the computer like this, he is taking a technological step backwards. Another racetrack, Silverstone, England. This is what Montoya calls his office. A Formula One car is a different species from a road car. It has no doors, and to save weight, it doesn't even have a built-in starter motor. When the engine starts, it idles at the same speed as the rest of us drive at. In comparison with the road car that Montoya drove at Valencia, it has few electronic aids. The aids that are allowed on Formula One cars have been banned, reinstated, modified, curtailed, and sometimes simply hidden from the scrutineers. Clever engineers are always trying to outwit the men who write the rules, or formula.
The big problem that late 20th century Formula One racing got itself into was that the cars were getting more and more clever. And the danger was that the driver was going to play a smaller and smaller part in winning the race. And that's not good box office.
If the drivers are the box office heroes, they are increasingly in the hands of the team's engineers. Engineers can now control not just what he drives, but how he drives it. Spectators, who switch on to watch the drivers battle on the track, are at the very heart of Formula One. Without spectators, sponsors would not bother to buy the space on the cars. Without the money from the sponsors, the teams cannot fund the technology that threatens to alienate the spectators. But without the technology, it isn't Formula One. This unique contradiction is in constant danger of destroying the sport. The problem first arose in 1977, when an apparently invisible secret advantage made two cars unbeatable. Since the late 70s, Formula One cars have looked less like cars and more like aircraft. Instead of the cigar-shaped, streamlined racers of previous eras, these cars of the new era evolved into extraordinary pieces of secret technology. The first were the sinister black Lotus 78 cars, designed by Colin Chapman. They hid a secret that few at the time understood. The Williams FW24 is a direct descendant of the Lotus 78. Its layout is universally accepted as the perfect solution for a single-seat racer. The 10-cylinder engine is low down in the middle. Either side of the cockpit are cooling ducts. Behind these are radiators for the engine. There are no fans to move the air when the car is stationary. The semi-automatic gearbox is bolted onto the back of the engine. It supports all the suspension and final drive to the rear wheels. Tucked between the engine and the driver is a self-sealing bag holding about 100 litres of fuel. The car's bodywork is entirely aerodynamic, moulded from carbon fibre composites. A rear-wheel drive road car's layout has not changed since the 1930s. The body is a steel shell called a monocoque. The engine is mounted between the wheels at the front. Ahead of the engine is the radiator. Fans keep it cool when the car is stationary. Bolted behind the engine is a gearbox.